level plan. We can say, okay, city staff, how do we implement? And then look at specific recommendations, and use this as a guiding document for the council to say, okay, are we doing things that are going to maintain solid budgetary management policies? Are we doing things that are focused on zero-based budgeting, focused on a 36-month budget process, and council review of the financials? Yeah, we are doing this. Yeah, the charter says that, the city manager's job description, your job description, all of those things complement this. Okay, do we have everybody? Okay. Turn on your tape recorder.
It's on.
Okay, we're back in session at 7:41. Debt service, I think we simply need a single line here on the goal. And I'm just gonna snowball here, don't fight for a second. It is, how do we put into one or two sentences that our budgetary process, okay, that our financial policies and procedures, okay, cannot lose sight of future debt or future debt payments, that we need to be cognizant of that constantly and plan for that. What do you think?
Laura's saying establish guidelines for debt financing that will provide needed facilities, land, capital equipment, and infrastructure improvements while minimizing the impact of debt payments on current and future revenues.
Like it, but
We don't even have to think.
We borrow a lot from other cities. San Marcos has one just very similar. Right. Which means we're going to come back later on with those policies.
okay. Can we say establish guidelines for debt financing and repayment? That will provide needed facilities, land, capital equipment, and infrastructure improvements while minimizing the impact on current and future revenues. Just delete.
I recommend deleting the word will. That's from my old contracting experience with the Air Force.
Okay. Good. That's okay. It's just spell check.
What's that going in?
You may have an extra stage.
What's a capital?
Doesn't understand what a capital equipment is.
Well, that's good. And then we've done debt service. That's clearly what we want to ensure that we do in debt service.
Should there be a comma after capital?
Well, no, capital equipment is.
Should be capital hyphen equipment.
Maybe.
Probably wants to be capitalized.
Like either, so we're just gonna take it for what it is. It's exactly what it says on here, so.
Must want to think it's like the capital. That's what I was doing.
Okay.
It doesn't like it. We
We
like it.
Capital letter, it's a capital Z.
Next goal item would be, do we want to, just from my lack of understanding, and Laura, you may know, are permit fees and that kind of stuff fall under the general category of utilities?
No.
Okay.
There's, yeah, permit would be, the permit fees, and then there's, fees, just like fees, like escort, alarm.
Right.
Well, alarm is
Could
called
could we
permit,
say this, fees and utilities as the goal? Just
Could we do utility fees and permits?
but, which, I mean, there's
Utilities,
larger than
fees,
permits.
and permits.
It's fees, it's permits, it's fees, it's, I'm gonna look in here and see what.
Is it
I don't have
utilities,
one.
fees, and permits?
That covers everything.
And I don't have a copy of,
There's service fees. Service fees is another word people use.
Okay, so we do want to do service, utility service fees?
no, utilities,
No,
comma,
fees.
utilities, comma, permits and fees.
Change your thing. Okay.
Okay, and here we really got two goals as it relates to utilities. And Andy, do you have handy a copy of that rate study? Or I may have it in my briefcase.
Not a picture, Mr. Jones.
No, I don't know how to look that in there.
He gave a good summary statement in there, talking about utility rates, saying that, you know, that they need to be, and we may be able to steal. I think I got it. Here it is, okay. You ready, Will, or Sharon? Maintain water and sewer rates that will generate sufficient revenue to pay debt service, reserve, operation, and maintenance.
Hold on, what page are you reading from?
Right.
So it'll be easier than.
That whole thing, it says, in accordance with industry standards, the city of Floresville should adopt. Well, we want the goal to maintain water and sewer rates that will generate sufficient revenue through replacement service there. And that clearly addresses all the utility rates. And we could even change that to maintain utility rates and not even go into water and sewer. Or should it be,
Yeah, that works.
could it be?
Because that would cover me back, yeah.
Yeah, but should it also say, because one of the things that we have as a shortfall there is implement and maintain. Because we recognize that we have the shortfall now, so we implement that, but we also put in there that we want to maintain rates that are sufficient. And then two, I want to use almost that same piece there, you know, it is implement and maintain cost-effective permit and a cost-effective permit and fee schedule or schedules, cost-effective permit and fee schedules.
Yeah, structure written down.
Yeah, but then we're also addressing the same thing here, that we have problems with fees, we have places where we're not collecting fees, but we want to make sure that they are cost effective to the city. We don't want to compare our rates to another city as the basis. We want to look at it from what is our cost of doing the business, and we certainly don't want to charge less than that. And I think we identified that.
Well, yeah, I think, yeah. Some of them aren't necessarily based all on based on
Right.
cost, yeah.
Okay, then the next title item is infrastructure. And again, we want to kind of maybe steal a little bit from that. Can you scroll up just a little bit to the debt service one? Through the budgeting process,
I still give you an answer.
yeah. Allow for needed facility, land, capital equipment, and infrastructure improvements. Period.
And needed improvements before the end. Before the end. Improvements. One of them.
And then we simply say, hey, you know, that we have to plan for, either through debt or through reserves or through other pieces, for the needs of the infrastructure. We clearly state that. And that comes full circle, like Doug was talking about, with the 36-month budget process and the debt service, and it all kind of ties together. Can you zoom down so we can look at the whole page there just a little bit?
A little bit smaller.
A little bit smaller, just so I can. Let's go to page one. So then we've taken our critical priorities and dropped it down to one page. Okay. The next section then would be specific actions.
Now, where we want to be, you want specific actions?
Essentially, scroll back up.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay, you already have, cash out. No, delete all of that crap in there, just so that we stop. Right after our, right there, bingo, delete. Okay, next section would be and is just scroll back up one more time. Oh, sorry, Sharon.
That's okay.
To the top of that page. Okay. get rid of current city status, just change it to critical priorities. Bingo. And then this one, we would just change it, the whole title, to specific actions. Okay, under monitoring, delete staff recommendations and make bullet one, no, don't delete the whole thing. Continue daily monitoring by comptroller and assistant. Continue monthly,
You want that as a second one?
not, okay, yeah, the second bullet. Continue monthly and quarterly okay, as required by requirements, after requirements, or, yeah, after reporting, excuse me, I'm sorry. As required by city charter and council directives. Then you can delete the rest of it. Okay, continue, and let's go. Continue monthly and quarterly reporting by the city manager. Okay? No. Same bullet. Reporting by the city manager. Because if we look at the charter, the city manager is tasked with the reporting. The comptroller is the vehicle that he uses. But the daily monitoring is done by the comptroller. And then between those two bullets, let's add continue routine monitoring. Okay, by city manager.
I think you also need to include staff, department heads or departments as a bullet too, because they need to be responsible too.
Okay, by continue routine monitoring by city manager and department heads.
Put together, because I think it's important that they take a stake in it.
And if we come back to the goals, which were okay, we want to.
Slide back,
Now,
slide
here's-
back up to the top real quick. I want to see the monitoring, very top. Okay.
So what do you define as routine? And should we, or should the city council be making that recommendation for not interfering with Andy's duties to orchestrate the work of the city staff?
But essentially, we're saying that this is something that is occurring now, okay, by contract, by charter, okay, and by practice. We're simply, by adding the words continue, we're reinforcing that this is going on now. This is a process that's already in place.
You can combine your first two bullets then, just by saying continue routine monitoring by city manager, comptroller, and all department heads. If you're not gonna define routine,
Okay.
again, that's a two-scoop.
And take the first one off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already spelled out in the city charter,
I
and
think
then
that,
job
yeah.
descriptions.
And we do that. Now, zero-based budgeting, and this is a discussion that we've had. Okay. Zero-based budgeting and the 36-month budget process. Okay? Do we want to, how do we want to implement? How do we want to, I mean, zero-based budgeting is easy, you know, to say, you know, beginning in fiscal year 13-14, okay, the budget process will be zero-based, okay, or we will begin initiating zero-based budgeting processes across departments, whether we get there or not.
The key word is initiative.
Well, referring back to my comment earlier that Mr. Rosenberg is supposed to be rewriting that part of the charter, how long, one, does it take to do the charter changes, to get it on the election, to get it elected, get it put in? I would recommend that you do it through the charter change and rewrite the paragraph or paragraphs that's currently written. And he said last year, he told me last year he was gonna rewrite the 9.2, 9.27 paragraphs.
But that's talking about the audit committee. I think we need to come to
Well, the reason I was asking that is if he's gonna put that together, that you gotta put it on an election, why not include in your budget process in the city charter?
we can add that as a note in here. Okay, let's go to we'll start the first bullet because we want to follow because the first thing was the zero-based budgeting. So we'll add a bullet above that one. Beginning in fiscal year 13-14. Okay. Implement zero-based budgeting.
Put that at the beginning, implement zero-based budgeting beginning fiscal year 2013-2014, period.
Yeah. Now, although labor intensive, we may want to put a footnote in here. No, let's just leave it at that. Because I think when we get to our metrics and how we're going to evaluate this thing, you know, to say, okay, when we look at this thing to say, okay, this section is a listing of specific actions we're going to take. The next section is metrics, targets, accountabilities to track the change. If we begin the implementation in fiscal year 2013, 2014, under our evaluation, our metrics, we expect to have full zero-based budgeting by fiscal year 14, 15.
Right.
Okay? So we could do that same thing here is implement a continuous 36-month budget process. Or budget. Okay? And then under our metrics, we can say to be fully implemented by fiscal year, you know, 14, 15 or 15, 16. You know, I would think, you know, we should shoot for 14, 15, but that's up for discussion. But that's the specific action. We want to implement zero-based budgeting. We want to implement a 36-month continuous budget. Okay? We want to continue the monitoring. We want to continue the reporting. Bingo. Those are the actions that we want to take under monitoring. The next one was what? Financial planning or financial management policy. here, Laura, is where I need your help. How do we, what specific actions do we need to be taking in the development and implementation of policies and procedures to do this? Can you scroll back up to the goals so we can?
That's what you're working on now, is trying to gather all those policies that you want to take up to council for approval, correct? So we need to pretty much state that.
Is there a,
Detailed.
no, I don't know that we need to go into the weeds, Andy, on that, but is there like a industry standard or a group of people, you know, that we could say, you know, that we're going to draft and implement financial policies and procedures that meet X standard?
And I'm almost thinking that sentence needs to be down in your others, because the top of this one was, what is this? This is really, this is the priority. Kind of one the same, on the next section.
Okay,
I mean,
okay,
I'm
then,
thinking this one needs to be a little bit more vague,
well, then
and
let's,
not have the 90, the next thing would be
well,
90.
the key is the 90 days. We put that in that first one. Could we say,
Yeah, but that's not, I mean,
Well-
that's what I'm saying, I think it should be physical, and put that in the second section, that it would be 90 days
Well-
is one bullet.
how about this, Laura? How about draft and present to city council the needed policies and procedures to maintain the industry standard 90-day fund reserves? That's the action we gotta take. If we're gonna develop policies, we gotta draft them and council's gotta approve them.
Yeah, because this is what I was, back on the other part, this is one of the statements, that these statements are tools to use to ensure the city's financial able to meet its current and future service needs, like
Okay, good.
policies themselves. So I
Good.
think that needs to be up there,
Oh,
and then,
no, I think that should be right here. Okay, because the goal is the 90-day fund reserves. Okay, we highlighted that in the very beginning to say, okay, hey, this was a problem, the city's never had it, that it's an industry standard. How are we going to get there? We're not going to get there until we have the policies and procedures, okay, to do appropriate financial management. Now, could you read that thing again?
because the very first sentence is comprehensive financial management policy statements. Assemble all the city's financial policies into one document. These statements are tools used to ensure the city is financially able to meet its current and future service needs. Something, that statement needs to be above earlier, and then that would be.
That would be your action, and this would be your.
These are, our action would be fund balance policy,
Okay.
if that makes,
That makes
in
sense.
other words, this would be more, a little more generic.
Okay, well, then we
right
just
here.
need to
And
tweak
put
that a
down
little
there,
bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Tweak that just a little bit.
that'd be one of your things down there.
Develop and maintain council approved
Mhm.
solvent budgetary management policies and procedures. Okay. And then we can go back up to the goal, and could you say, read that again?
Well, this, I have to combine this. Statements, these statements are tools used to ensure the city's financial ability to
So you
meet.
can just say the comprehensive financial management policy statements are the tools used to ensure.
We want to.
Um,
Let me see it again, Lauren. I can tweak that real
Yeah,
quick.
because I think we need to come. I'm not looking.
Implement comprehensive financial management policy, okay, to ensure that the city is financially able to meet its current and future service needs.
Yeah.
And insurance should start with an E.
And down, you have your 90
You're not
day.
you're not putting money against it for insurance, your insurance.
Thank you.
Okay.
I got smacked many a time.
You learn your lesson the first time out.
It's just a easy, good movie.
That too.
That, be that, where's that?
That, be sure that
To ensure the city is functioning.
Yeah. Okay, and then another one would be, maintain accounting practices that conform to generally accepted accounting principles. And apply, yeah.
They conform with,
That's,
maintain accounting practices that conform
conform to
with.
generally accepted accounting principles.
Get to me ready.
And apply, and this is actually in my budget, one of my budget documents, so.
So as a third one, or?
It's like one thing, let's put the whole, it kind of goes together, and comply with prevailing federal, state, and local statutes and regulations. I know, but that's actually in my, one of the things I think I've handed out already in the budget process, or budget book, that statement.
Next item, debt service. We need to change those to numbers too, Sherry,
Yeah,
because we started with numbers on the front.
Oh, the front page.
So the next set of specific actions is debt service. Okay. Clearly, here's one of the areas where we've got to be a little bit more specific, that we have to coordinate with the 4A on this thing, you know? So we've got an independent entity, i.e. the 4A Corporation, seemingly an independent entity, but really not, because a lot of what they do is covered in our budget and in the city's budget, but not all of it is. And then there's the issues of increasing tax rates. Some of your wording in here looked really good, Andy. Clearly, the first action that we have to take would be the restructuring of that debt. There's not any doubt in anybody's mind that the city or the 4A can make a $1.3 million payment. So clearly, step one would be to initiate. Can I borrow that paper you had again from Mr. Jordan that you showed me? Somebody there?
There you go.
Okay. Thinking of the verbiage here. Hang on just a second. Okay, well, let's just go with this. Immediately pursue a restructuring of the
P-U-R. P-U-R.
Can't do it till the
P-U-R.
one day.
P-U-R.
Did you put that in there? I thought it was in there, the date.
September 2014. Okay,
Sorry.
but I mean, if we're pursuing it or looking into it, you know, immediately pursue a restructuring of, and he called it the 2010 series bond, I think is what he called it.
General obligation of funding,
That's
series 2010.
That's callable on 9/1/2014.
Okay. Okay, immediately pursue a restructuring of general obligation bond series 2010 as early as September 2014. Okay, because clearly that's going to have to be a consideration in both the next budget of the 4A Corporation as well as in the next budget of the city of Floresville. So we need to, okay. Item 2,
Sherry, just before you move on, general, just to word it correctly, it's general obligation refunding bonds.
funding bonds.
Refunding bonds,
Series 20 series.
bonds,
Okay.
series 2010.
Okay.
Bonds.
Bond.
Yes. There you go.
Okay. This and all other debt service or this and all other debt service, you know, must be included in all future budgeting processes. Of the city of Floresville, of the city and the 4A Corporation. And should it be 4A Economic Development Corporation? Because it isn't 4A, but
They're the same, yeah, they're the same, 4A and 4B.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
they're both economic development, but is the appropriate term to say 4A Economic Development Corporation, or do we just say 4A
No.
Corporation?
Leave it up to, leave it up to
Yeah, he can say 4A Corporation and 4B.
And 4B?
Because the city has to approve any debt they issue,
Okay, the 4A and 4.
and you approve their budgets. So it has to be actually included when we get to that point.
Okay, good. Infrastructure. Specific actions. Well, clearly, we've got, these are easy ones. One, upgrade wastewater treatment plant.
Jim, on here it talked about, selling or, what is it?
Privatization of the event center?
Mhm.
That's not gonna change the debt service in this piece of it. That's gonna be an avenue. What I kinda envision this and think about it this way, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, and Sherry, you really talked about this, is if we can take these 4 steps, we took the critical priorities, we're addressing the specific actions, We'll take the next one that's gonna talk about metrics, targets, accountabilities, and then lastly, follow-up. If we can turn that into 4 pages, 1 page each, say, here's city staff. Now, city staff can say, okay, council approved it, this is what they want to do. They can now come back to the council and say, you gave us this goal, this is how we recommend you achieve it. And let them deal with the weeds of this. If they want to come back and say, hey, we need to privatize the event center, what are our options? Do you want us to pursue that or not, to help achieve it? That's where we're going to try and keep this plan so that all of the supporting documentation is fluid, but the front set of pages almost becomes concrete to say, okay, what are our 10 commandments, if you will, when it comes to spending money, developing plans, etc., that's going to guide us to a turnaround, to getting back to a state of insolvency. And whether a council member or the 4A wants to come back to the city and say, hey, you know, if we're going to consider this debt service in our budget, maybe we need to think about privatizing it. Well, yeah, that's in compliance with this goal. Okay? What we don't want to do is tie our hands to a point to something that says, oh, we're going to do this. And then it turned out not to be a good idea, and then having to come back and change the plan. Where I'd rather have a 4 or 5 page plan that says, okay, here's our guiding documents. In the same way we use the city charter, these are our guiding documents as it comes to monitoring. And granted, we're reinforcing under monitoring what the city charter says, what Andy's contract says, what we're already doing. We're reinforcing that. But we're also telling the citizens, and we're telling other businesses, these are our operational principles. These are our operational goals. The weeds, they don't care about. If they want detail, yeah, you can look at the appendix, and that's going to change from day to day to day. Does that answer your question?
What was the question?
Okay. Sorry. Okay, these are clearly, develop a zoning plan. Create/update impact fees for water or for utilities and streets. Develop water and sewer model. Let's change it to water sewer system models. Okay. Andy, what would be the best way to address streets?
We've got the requirement already from the council to come up with a master plan for streets.
Okay, let's put in implement street master plan. And then we can also we could actually even, Andy, would it be better to simply say, implement a 10-year plan? And then, because the 10-year plan will include wastewater plan, zoning plan, all of these other things. You know, should it be develop and implement 10-year infrastructure plan? 10-year master plan? 10-year infrastructure master plan? Infrastructure master plan. And then you can delete all of the rest, because those are all sub-bullets of that.
Well,
I think they ought to stay.
yeah, because they're in the waters, for the impact fees, you have to have, they're separate, but not under the 10-year. I mean, they all kind of tie into the 10-year.
Okay.
I guess you could say, that makes, yeah, they all kind of, they work independently and then they also combine.
And, okay. upgrade
People call it,
was,
yeah, park,
upgrades.
then you
over.
also have Parks Master Plan,
Okay.
you want that one too.
Should we say continue to upgrade the wastewater plant since that's an ongoing process?
I think we're getting too much
Too
into,
far?
too
Okay.
far
Yeah.
into it. I tend to agree with the councilman to say, develop and implement 10-year infrastructure master plan, that we can leave that. Now, if your concern is about impact fees and stuff on that, then we can do one more
Well,
number other
actually-
than that for,
But I think we could go back into the metrics, Andy, and say, okay, hey, by
That's
this
how you get
date,
there.
we're gonna have a zoning plan,
Sure.
by this date, we're
Yeah.
gonna have impact fee study, by this time, we're gonna, and start to put some dates to those specifics and just stay with the 10-year infrastructure plan as the specific actions.
Get rid of all that.
yes.
You know, because a 10-year infrastructure plan also addresses fire department and emergency medical services and that kind of stuff, you know? So now we can go on to the next section, which is titled metrics. So all that stuff can go.
Oh, I found that.
Sure, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Do you have that saved somewhere else? know
I
you
do, I have three
Okay,
different
you're gonna
versions
leave
of
it-
it.
Well,
so-
this last one, because as we spoke right now, as was mentioned, we're gonna come up with a 4-pager that this is what's gonna equal for us. We need to keep all of this.
Yes.
other
No, I
stuff.
have the original one that you had, I had the one that I
Well,
presented tonight,
The
and
one that you and Laura and the remainder of the staff may flow a lot better is what I'm looking at.
yes, sir. I just did that one going with
Because
the
that's
SP
another,
tube, so.
yeah, that's another thing that we hope to accomplish, like you mentioned, that we've got a 4-page plan that somebody can grab and say, okay, I can see where they're going on this. We want to break that down to a 1-page plan for a department. This is specifically, this is comprehensive, but this is specific for you.
Well, the way I
So they can
envision this,
understand.
Andy, is we can take each one of these specific actions, you know, and it could be a day-long brief to the city council of how you're gonna accomplish this, you know. I can see that, you know, each of these things is gonna develop into a lot more by the city manager's office, by department head, all the way down to workers is how they're gonna accomplish that.
Exactly.
If we start with the core piece of this, I think we'll be really well. So we're not here till 10 o'clock. Metrics, targets, and accountabilities to track the change.
And that's how you want to title?
Or just metrics, targets, and accountabilities. Should be comma between metrics and. Okay. Now, do this, Sharon, go up to the previous section.
The one we just worked on?
Yeah,
Okay.
and just copy from monitoring to the end of it.
Thank you. Zoom time.
And go back down to where we're at in the metrics, and just paste it right there. Okay. So, under these specific actions, how are we going to, what's the target? Okay, so for zero-based budgeting, if we're going to implement it in 2013, 2014, okay, at what point should we be 100% zero-based budget? Is it realistic? Don't delete all the rest of it. 'cause
I'm not,
we're-
I'm just looking at
Okay. To have zero-based budgeting by all departments by fiscal year 2014, 2015. Is that a reasonable, attainable goal?
complete by all departments would be, 2013, 2014, that we're gonna start working on already. You're saying 2014, 2015?
Mhm.
I've got confidence in,
I'm a opponent for a hybrid is my thing, so it's hard for me, because I'm like, well, you know, you're gonna start over zero-based budgeting every year. What ends up happening is you see you're fighting over office supplies. There's certain things that kind of like I like a hybrid, so, you know. But, yeah.
Well, technically, if you're doing a 36-month, at the end of every quarter, you're gonna project out the other quarter, so it shouldn't be on an annual review for your stuff like your supplies, your fuel, and all the other.
You're gonna be able to
Zero-based
adjust.
budgeting means you start over every year with zero base.
So technically what we're looking at
Technically.
anyways is a hybrid anyways.
It kind of, yeah, I feel like, it's like we're talking about doing a continuous, yeah.
I mean, we're not defining zero-based budgeting to an industry standard. What we are talking about with zero-based budgeting, okay, is that you gotta justify it. Just because you got it last year, doesn't mean you're gonna get it this year. You may need more this year, you may need less. Well, then it needs to be a, the only way I can really describe that, or maybe it's just a poor
That's what I
term,
do as a hybrid, that's because what I've done is.
is
certain line
zero-based
items
budgeting. You know,
Well,
granted,
you're
certain
gonna
things
show
are gonna
off.
come across,
Yeah.
that we're gonna be able to pull salaries, benefits, payroll expenses, debt service payments, required training. A lot of that stuff is gonna come across boom, boom, boom. But when we look at little things like travel, additional training courses, there may be a need for that. You know, if we go for a zero-based budgeting piece by all departments by fiscal year 2014-15, and a full 36-month budget process by the following fiscal year, then we're not budgeting a year at a time, we're budgeting a quarter at a time. And that whole budget process will smooth out. Now, whether it be by committee, be it done by a hybrid of city staff, council, and citizens, I don't know the answer to that. But I think if we look at being zero-based budgeted by fiscal year 2014-15 and having a continuous 36-month budget by fiscal year 15-16, I think those are achievable goals.
I agree.
So change
Is there some reason on your paragraphs?
No.
I'm gonna have to go back and reformat the whole thing, so I was trying and it's just aggravating me, so we'll get all the wording in, I'll reformat it, and then.
The next one's 15, 16.
And the words that wouldn't be implemented, they would be zero-based budgeted by fiscal year 2014-2015 across all departments.
She has an audience. It's like,
Oh, that's no excuse. You can see me putt.
Can you repeat what you said, Mr.
Zero-based budgeted by fiscal year 2014-15. Okay, now just change, go back before the word by. Zero-based budgeted across all city departments. Okay. And then we'll get rid of a 36-month continuous budget across all funds funds by fiscal year 2015-16. We don't need 3 and 4.
I will get rid of them.
Well, actually, we could add 3, sorry.
The same one, or we're gonna have just?
No,
another-
item number 3 right
Okay.
there.
I'll fix it.
I did the same thing.
What was, when we go back to that council directive that said, that the second regular city council meeting of every month shall be the financial reporting month.
You can't hold that very closely, because it's very difficult for me to do my job, just FYI.
Okay.
Because it just doesn't, everything doesn't fall with that meeting,
Okay.
I'm just,
That's,
Okay,
yeah, kind of makes me.
monthly and financial, monthly and quarterly. Financial reports received by city council, will be received by city council, and then we can, you know, put by, and then we just put today's date, because we're already doing it. This is a measurement that we said, hey, this was our goal, this is a specific action, but, you know, we can say by March 2013, and then be done. Okay, even though we're still tweaking that process.
We just want, don't need a specific date, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So we put our benchmarks up there for monitoring. What benchmarks under financial management policies do we put up there? Or what is a reasonable, achievable goal for these policies and procedures?
how quick can we get some going and then state in there that from that point on, they're gonna be continuously brought to
Well,
council for adoption?
Let's go back to that, let's go even simpler than that, Andy. You talked about complete what was the word they talked about? Complete?
Comprehensive.
I read it at the very beginning of it.
Comprehensive.
Okay, a comprehensive policies and procedures, okay, to be in place by when? What, is it by the end of this fiscal year, or are we going to the end of the next fiscal year? What is a timeline to develop these policies and get them to council and approved?
I know, that's why maybe you could say begin with the this current year.
No, we need to put a benchmark to say, when are we gonna achieve this goal?
Beginning in current year.
I don't know, that's why it's hard for me to be.
Because we already said we're gonna do these processes.
Yeah.
Okay, when are we gonna achieve it? When is our goal on the wall? When do we want to be able to say, we have comprehensive policies and procedures that are solvent budgetary management policies and that maintain the accounting practices to conform with generally accepted
That could be by
practices?
13, 14. I mean, they're not gonna, you're what, I mean. 'cause
By
it's
the
a-
end of next fiscal year.
Yeah.
So put,
There should be-
okay, by end of fiscal year 13, 14.
Yeah, because their policies are fairly, yeah.
13, 14.
So then on a critical action, does that also mean that you'll have a 90-day reserve by the end of the next fiscal year?
No, because here we're just talking about the policies and procedures. When
Yeah.
is,
Policy.
okay, now, when we talk about the 90-day reserve, what is a reasonable, achievable goal to have those in place?
I wanna, let's talk about that, Laura. How, that's a very good question. What we've seen already in your October, November, and December financials, And now that we're gonna, you've already put in the council packets about, I always put in the, I always forget the balances that.
Oh, fund balances.
Fund balances in there. What are we looking at diminishing the deficit or totally eliminating and then starting on our 90-day fund balance? If we continue the same practices that have already been directed by the council.
Well, I think that's what, like Audit said, it's gonna be probably a 24-month.
Okay.
To get us,
Then let's,
to get started, I mean, yeah, to get completely to the black, and then, so you're looking at,
So-
I think she'd even said up to 36 months, I mean, I think that's.
okay,
We had talked about shooting even higher than that, which at the last staff meeting that we had was to at least decrease that by some, which it was, what did we say, 18?
Yeah,
24
we said
months.
18 to 24 months.
well then let's break this down into steps to say that general fund deficit reduction of 30% each fiscal year, beginning with this current fiscal year. So if our goal is 30%, that pushes you a little beyond 36 months. Okay? General fund deficit reduction of not less than 30% per year. Okay?
Yeah.
Beginning fiscal year 12, 13.
Yeah, because we're probably, yeah, with just the 5 people, 5 vacancies that we're
Okay.
doing right now.
And then, okay, development of 90-day fund reserves. Okay.
Well, and I wouldn't,
Well,
I'm gonna say just development of fund, well, I guess that goes back to this.
the same
This is
state
the matrix side.
of the 90-day fund reserves, okay? Okay, if in 3.5 years, Laura, we reduce the deficit to 0, how many years at that rate would it take, given the growth that we're seeing, given the increases in revenue that we're seeing? Okay, because obviously that will accelerate as out years come. You know, the deficit reduction will accelerate in the out years. Okay? And the fund reserve balances will accelerate. Is it a 3-year process to develop a 90-day fund reserve? Is it a 5-year process? What?
See, I mean, you know, your 90 days is based on your budget, so that could alter.
Well, I understand that. But I mean, what is a reasonable development timeframe? Okay? If we're going to take 3 years, 12, 13, 14, 15, 15, 16, half of 16 by 2020, which is 4 years later, is that a reasonable time to have 90-day fund reserves? Is that a reasonable goal?
Very reasonable, taking into consideration what is going on in our area. We are hoping, on the deficit portion to tackle that quicker than that. We're giving ourselves adequate time, like you stated, Councilman. But if we start doing the zero-based budgeting practices and continue the mandated council directives of limiting spending, we should be able to tackle that quicker and start working on the fund balance in a 90-day reserve.
If we can, in sales tax and things like that started increasing, I can see that you can work on the 90-day in 3 years. So 2015.
Okay, well, I'm looking at not working on it. When would it be there?
When I say work on, because you gotta get out of the red first, and then,
That's why
and that's
he's
what I'm saying.
talking about.
Do we say 2019, 2020?
I think you.
Is that an aggressive
that's, you could go sooner than that, I mean, I don't.
Okay.
That's,
Is 1819. Let's go 1819. So that we're going to say, hey, in a 5-year time period, we can eliminate the debt and we can build the reserves. That's what we're saying.
Yes.
Okay. And then we've addressed the financial management plans. We've put the goals up there. Debt service. Okay. Clearly the goal is to have general obligation refunding bond series 2010 restructured before September 30th, 2016. On or before.
September 30th.
Yeah, September 30th. Okay. Now, can we, with that restructuring, and some of the numbers that I saw were ranged anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 a year for that debt service, and with the paying off of the Bank of America loan, and the potential privatization and or 4A management or autonomy operationally of that facility, can we expect to have that facility profit? Is that a reasonable goal to put out there? To have the Floresville Event Center running where it is not a liability to the city's general fund. With that restructuring, with their policies and procedures and in their management, or even outsourcing the damn thing, is that a reasonable goal to be putting in here? Okay, because that's the big challenge, really. When we look at it from the city's perspective, is the debt service of the 4A. So can we look at in our, as a goal, as a measurement, to have the Floresville Event Center at a break even by a certain year?
It's a tough one.
I was gonna
Because
say,
every city
cities
that we
don't.
talk with in regards to their event centers that they.
And I realize that. Or can we bring that cost effective to a percentage?
Sure.
Can we say that they should be within a 20%, 25% of break even by fiscal year 16, 17? With the restructuring of their debt, with the policies and procedures, is that a reasonable goal?
Yes. What percentage number, Laura, would you?
So I still go back to, we're still waiting, I don't think we've gotten a clear answer of how can that facility be run? Is it have to stay under the general fund? Or because of the fact of that debt, how it was issued?
But still, what we have to do is get it out, I'm not saying take it out of the general fund. What I'm saying is that
Okay.
the revenues
The revenues.
and expenses are within a 25% break even point.
Ms. Conley, what's your input on any of that at this point in time? I know you all are just starting off on looking at.
We are just starting off, and I'm wading through numbers and paper and learning it since.
You know, this may be a number that we have to adjust out.
Sure.
But if we're setting marks on the wall to say, okay, are we being successful? We have to reduce that delta, regardless of what fund it is coming from. We have to reduce that expense of the event center. Now, refinancing it's going to reduce a significant piece. Well, no, it's not going to reduce a significant piece. It's going to increase it because we're $100,000 debt right now, $100,000 a year debt. We're talking $400,000 to $600,000 a year debt, and that's not what we're paying Bank of America. So we're going to increase our liability on that, but we have to minimize that. We have to work to minimize that. Now, be it
It's hard to, because it's a hard one. I look at people's budgets and when it comes to convention centers.
well, let's.
Just don't maintain.
No,
themselves.
let's
Bigger
bring it
cities.
to a, okay,
Really get a number on that
reduce,
right now.
let's change this, reduce the Floresville Event Center operating costs.
There you
Operating costs to within 125% of revenue. So that gives us a 25% window. So if it costs $125 to do it, to run it, we've got to show $100 worth of revenue. Okay? And that just kind of be the guideline. And we're not labeling it for a fund, we're not labeling it to sales tax, but what we're giving ourselves is a mark on the wall to say, okay, we know that this place may not ever be 100% profitable, but let's put a mark on the wall that we've got to move towards, okay? That we reduce those operating costs to within 125% of revenue, not generated revenue, because
Jim,
sales
I'd like
tax.
to say that, Gloria, in the meetings with Gloria, and Gloria's speaking, and you've gone out there and talked to her, and she's made more room for all the oil companies and all that sort of stuff, and business is picking up. And, she's been given the go-ahead by Andy to consolidate all those nonprofits at the other end, and the books are being kept. I think the mayor's helping her set a spreadsheet up to keep finances straight and to keep our inventory straight and count it, and they're getting some organization going to it.
That's good. And this would be, if the council approves this, a directive to the 4A, And as we did in that workshop, and I put it again on the agenda for Thursday, was, we talked about giving operational control to that board. Granted, it will never be 100% independent of the city staff, but if we give them that operational control, it's with this goal in mind. And let's put fiscal year 15-16. I think that is a reasonable. Okay, what was the utility, what's the verbiage we used?
That was it.
No, that's infrastructure. We should have something on utilities. Did we skip it? Yep, we sure did.
But it's at the top,
It's at the top, under goal. Okay, okay, so we need to go back to specific actions. Right under debt service.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Hit save as right now.
It's been, I have it set to where it automatically saves every 4.5 minutes, so, yeah, we're okay.
Delete, oops.
Okay, clearly under first action would be implement recommendations from
the water and sewer.
the water sewer rate study. implement recommendations of, or phase one recommendations. Of water and sewer rate plan by community resource group. Okay. And this may be going on, and maybe it would be where it would be. The one thing that we gotta talk about under all of these things is that not only do we want to make these changes, we want to set in a review process so that we don't end up this far behind the power curve again. Okay, so as we are researching permits and fees, you know, we would want to have not only implement appropriate rates, but we would want to have a review cycle going on to say, how often should we be reviewing these rates? How often should we be reviewing fees? And I don't know that there's what the standard would be on that. You know, a review cycle, you know, and fees to industry standards, or something to that effect.
Pearland actually has in theirs every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
And that's, you know, you also do it during your budget process. That's one of kind of your steps when you start looking at revenues. You kind of, it moves to my world. Yeah.
Put 24 to 36 months. Okay. Bingo. And that covers all of that stuff that we're doing. One, hey, here's the immediate thing that we can do. We're already doing some review cycles in place for rates and fees. Okay.
And I would suggest rewriting that to say, implement a rate and fee review cycle at least every 24 to 36 months, because it's redundant to say recycle, review cycle to review. Implement a rate and fee review cycle at least every 24 to 36 months. Shorten to the point.
Okay, now we can go back down to the metrics. Okay. Hey, goal one here, phase one recommendations of water sewer rate plan implemented by April 2013.
Is that correct? The correct, or the incorrect rates? That nickel versus 50 cents or 7.5 cents versus 75 cents?
He didn't address that sewer piece in his, he didn't actually, for commercial, kind of because that rate.
He actually exceeded that.
It's, if we put the current rate, and we go with the commercial rate as it is, we should be maintained well. He just worked on residential.
Okay. Now, here's where you guys are gonna have to give us some time frames. You know, one of the appendixes in here talked about it, and I asked Sherry about it, under revenues and expenses, okay? Here are some pieces, and we probably need to break this down just to be a little simpler, to say, existing fees, you know, updated by new revenue fees identified and implemented by. So, you know, existing permit and fees, permit and fee schedule updated by when? June?
No.
Sooner?
No, it's gonna be a little bit later, because they're all of different pieces. I would,
We need to have it by,
I would go no later than September 30th
yeah,
this
because
fiscal
we need
year.
to
That's
have
what-
it
that
with
would
our,
be
with our new
reasonable, but I
budget
think
cycle, so that
you're
we
getting
know
ready to
the
start
goals.
budget, there's a lot of pieces that are gonna, yeah.
Okay, so
Not
by
just one.
September.
end of fiscal year.
Mhm. End of
2012, 13.
September 30, 2013. Not like the month, so. It's just gonna be
Okay, and then, new permit and fee schedules developed and implemented by,
Same thing.
well, I was like, isn't that,
no, I
Because
think,
they're new.
Yeah, there are
you know
some
what I
we
mean?
don't have, that's true.
We've never had them before, so there's gonna be more detailed work in the finding, how we're gonna implement it. Make sure that we can legally do that.
can we go halfway through the next fiscal year, which would put us March 30th, I guess, that we can have some of those in place?
Sure.
And obviously, that a report could be given to the council to say, hey, these are the ones we're ready to implement, these are the ones we're still working on. But we can at least get that process going to say, okay, here's our March. So by March 2015, 14.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for 15.
Okay.
Oh, no, we
And then we're done. We've addressed our metrics. Okay?
Now,
And-
what about infrastructure? Did you want to break that down any, or just leave it?
Well, no, because we want to break this one down a little bit. We want to say, okay, we want to have a zoning plan by. We want to have a water model by. We want to have these things by. Now, many of these are already in progress, but clearly the first one is the zoning plan. Develop our zoning and future use plan.
Is it, official name?
Yes. Okay. By, they've said 9 months, this just got initiated, so we could say January 2014. What was the word we used on it? Let's see, now the next one was, actually, let's back up. Before we get to zoning and future use, the first one should be wastewater plant expansion. Okay. The first step in this is obviously the funding of it. Okay. When is a reasonable date to say, we will have a funded and approved plan for wastewater plant
This
expansion?
is the obstacle or hurdle that we've encountered, and that's the engineering portion. That's the only thing lacking. The cost of that has been sent out by our city engineer at
89.9.
$89,900. So that funding is what we're looking at, that we have to pay.
In order just for the study, right?
Okay, but I mean, clearly this is, you know, let me take off on a tangent here, okay? part of the discussion on the wastewater plan has been, oh, we need to expand our existing plant. We need to expand our existing plant. One of the things that I think we're gonna find in this zoning and future use plan is that our growth is, as Lou Rosenberg has talked about, is over the hill. Either one direction or the other direction, or both. And our sewer plant's down here in the center. Does it make more sense? Would it be more cost effective to look at smaller sewer plants in the areas where the growth is? And that would eliminate the need for the lift stations. It would certainly take the demand off of the existing sewer plant. That may very well be a real possibility in the future, as our zoning and future use plan may tell, okay? To say that we need to expand our wastewater treatment plant is true. We need to expand that capabilities, be it at the existing plant or another plant. But we need to be able to say we want to have wastewater treatment plant expansion plans in place. By when? Okay? Because if in fact, and this is a tangent, guys, but it is important to this goal. If in fact this future use plan says, hey, here's where all your growth is. That's where you need to be planning your impact fees. This is where you need to be planning your other pieces. We may need to look at, you know, hey, expanding our capacity here is a great thing, but then we're putting in more and more lift stations. You know, I was talking to one builder that would like to build a 500 apartment complex, 500 unit apartment complex behind Walmart. Would that lift station that we have there support it? No. Not a chance. Okay? Plus the McCoy's, plus the Tiger Mart, plus all these other things that are going in. So that may be a very real consideration. Previously, the focus has been on expanding the capabilities of our existing plant. So I would argue that we don't necessarily need funding for an engineering plan on the expansion of this plant until we really know what that future use piece is. Because can we get away with building a smaller sewer plant at that point and take the load off of this one? I don't know the answer, but that may be something that we have to consider. So when it comes to this goal, do we want to have definitive plans in place by the end of next fiscal year? You know, not necessarily say we've got the funding.
Sure.
But I'm not convinced at this point that expanding our existing plant is a good idea.
Well, that's something that we've talked about, and that idea has come up. In Alice, where I'm originally from, they did the same thing. They built a smaller plant where the growth was, and now they have their main one, and then they've got a smaller one. So that's a very valid point.
Okay, so maybe we don't even need to identify the wastewater treatment plant in our plan here, because we've identified the zoning and future use plan, which will impact that. As will the water and sewer models, as will the impact fee study. Correct?
That's correct.
So then, delete one.
Do you want zoning to go back to one,
Yeah.
or is there, okay.
Talked myself out of it.
All right, good deal, let's go on.
Complete impact fee study by
listed it on our workshops that we had as impact fees. 2014 to 2015 is what we're looking at. Land use plan is on target at 2013. We've got system maps, and we had budgeted for the water model for this budget cycle. Of course, we haven't moved on that, so.
Okay,
What is the best process, Laura, of course, is the land use plan. We've got to get that done, something that we should have done some time ago. What was M&S's recommendation is how we can get to the impact fees? We need the water and the wastewater models before we move to the impact fees?
I'd have to go back and look. I think there's 3 things. Now I'm drawing a blank.
well, then,
And I think that that's
Plan,
the water and the wastewater models.
water models.
And then the-
Mapping, the mapping first, and then those two deals before.
well, let's just put in here, and you guys can go back to do this, and we need to do this in consecutive fiscal years.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, we're doing the zoning and future land use plan by January 2014. In the next fiscal year, we'll do whatever one needs to be done. And then the following fiscal year, the next one, okay? The other piece of those two, you know, the water sewer models and the impact fees, whatever's appropriate timelines on that, but I think that just needs to be sequential fiscal years. The other marks that we want to put in here,
What
okay,
are our standards here for?
that's what they gotta look up and see.
Yeah, we have to look, because there's, it actually follows the state statute.
Now, let's add
20 months and days.
the comprehensive street maintenance plan. A comprehensive 10-year master plan, and look at some dates for that. I think we can very easily have a comprehensive street maintenance plan that covers the timeline based upon the costs for the city to do it, which we know what they are, and we know what we have. Going out and financing that way right now is not an option, okay? But we can at least have, 3 years planned out by the end of this fiscal year. And then and keep it at that, and just say have it a comprehensive 3-year street maintenance plan.
You want a 3-year street maintenance plan?
But you can put the dates on that already. We're going to conference street maintenance.
September 30, 13.
Put in the 3 years. That's what we said.
Yeah, or 36 months, whatever we need to do that, and Andy, and I think we're being comprehensive if we are detailed for 36 months. And then we put out maybe some yearly expectations in the out years, okay? Because like with the 36-month budget process, that's going to be an evolving plan, as prices change, as new things come available, as sales tax fluctuates. That's going to drive that plan. We can base we can plan based on the revenue we have now and the expenses that we have now and say, okay, if everything remains the same, this is where we're going to be to complete. And it may be 25 years out, okay? And based on the currently identified priorities, you're probably not going to be done till 18 years. But you are within the first, but 3 years we can plan out with some reasonable detail. And then I think all of these pieces feed to the comprehensive master plan, okay? And what I think, I don't know that we need to put, okay, let's do this. Comprehensive 10-year master plan review by end of fiscal year.
Also, maybe you could say incorporated into the budget. I mean, that's where it comes back to, you have, because you started, do you have a 10-year? Or no, we don't have 10 years, we just have the 5.
And many of those 5-year pieces are on budget. So I think we address the budget process when we say, okay, yeah, 36 month, and if we go back into the goals to say that, yeah, this has got to be a budgeting process. I think we identified that. And I think we've got our goals. And I think that the last piece of this, under follow-up. And we can do this very, very simply, okay? That semi-annually, okay, this plan is reviewed by the audit committee, or this committee that recommended it, and city council. And that way it is a continuous process, okay? And we go to a semi-annual review of this insolvency turnaround. You know, and obviously the goal on this thing is 2018, 2019, but semi-annually this committee, or a committee of the that consists of citizens and council members, needs to review this.
We're going to put that in a resolution?
No, we'll make that as a recommendation in here. If council chooses to put it into a resolution, they can. But then all the rest of this stuff is your plan to support this. Okay? Everything else is staff's doing this, and we can break down. All the rest of this stuff can be deleted, and now we've got a simple 8 or 10 page document. And I think those goals are good. The only thing I would ask is, after you kind of roughly delete the excess stuff, is print a copy of it so we can take a look at it real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I'll get it ready to go in the morning. I'll work on it, make sure that it's all ready to go, print it out, make sure that it fits. And then would you like me to send an email out to everybody for review? Oh, right now?
I don't want to meet again. I want to be off tomorrow.
Oh, well, in that case, I don't have time to work.
Laura can't be.
I'll get it right now.
Just-
Yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah, we'll wait. We're gonna take a recess.
Yep.
Yeah, y'all work it.
Oh.
Then you have 13. I mean, you gotta be so confusing. I mean, 2015, 2016. Oh, they're talking about FY 16. Oh, really? They kept it?
Y'all can do anything for it.
Not yet.
That's what we're having.
Now,
Like
those were
I
ready
told him,
to
he put the thing in the paper. It says, we gotta know what we can do, what we can't do, or keep those doing or going to jail.
Metrics, targets.
Well, the one gentleman that came up when y'all went into executive session, addressed, he came up to them, and he's with the Knights Court office. And when I told him that hopefully
Yeah,
we get Alex as a
when you
director, he
review
said,
and I'll add it.
So that would be
he's
follow-up.
a member of the Knights. And so is
Go
his
to the
brother.
beginning of
I
this.
said, okay, well, I want to get his brother to sit down and talk with him. No, they haven't done anything.
What we want to be able to do is say, okay,
And then try to get a feel for why
so
she's
we
got
changed this.
$27,000 in that special funding line.
Okay, so we just call,
Because to me, simple math is
follow
say, you've had
up,
17
follow
months,
up on,
and after the,
you know, that kind of thing.
Water guy did
And
this,
then we do this in semi-annual, and we just change this, and then change this, so we're gonna delete conclusion.
Official
And then-
2,500.
Change the title.
That's
The
25.
titles, so that we've got
17,
critical priorities.
because it went into effect on October 2011. After the
Actions.
$40,000. So where was the 20, or the, what's the
Uh,
difference in that
metrics.
between something and that? Where's the money?
And then the monitoring, which is and then we're good. And then
It goes into a special revenue fund, and ours does.
the only other pieces that I would just recommend, just double check all the overtime claims recurring.
Well, the ordinance basically,
And
they leave it simple, and it says used by the party.
There we go, introduction.
With oversight.
Now,
Well, that's why I still do it.
just insolvency term, fine. And then we're good to say, okay, here's where we're going, we're telling you where we're going. There is no,
I think we went to the blue wave.
we've already really set our goals, our priorities, we're good. And then that goes away. And then we have a couple of appendixes, and just make sure these are.
Yeah, I'm gonna get them to get them, yeah, as soon as they get those, I'll put them in order, which is why I put the dots there, okay?
And then the other thing that
See, my concern was that the fabric has stretched since the end of the game. So where it comes down,
so what I would do
there's no retaining
is
wire
take a,
in the bottom of the fence, and it's bending back under. Yeah, but it's going to decide where the kids are playing.
following that monitoring, I would take a new, here's January 13, January 14, all the way through, January 19, 2019. And then tag each one of these. That we set a goal, like here, we said zero-based budgeting by 2014. So we would go to the beginning of 2014, which would be here, okay? And say one, and then just come down in here in small point, zero-based budgeting by all city departments. Then
Well,
here we go,
it's a stretch problem.
two, so that we've got our marks,
I can tell the guys.
and kind of a Gantt chart
Just
form.
when you get the labor man out.
So that somebody can look at it and say, okay, here we are today,
I
we're,
mean,
what
I
do we
even
have
did
to
the 12 foot
accomplish?
sitting in the
And
ice.
it just simplifies it for somebody to look at and say, instead of going through this page, to say, when are you gonna do this?
Well, all they
We
had
give it
done was
curl
go
out.
out there.
And
I'll
then
work
the
on
simple
that.
graph.
I'll work on that, I'll get the drafting done and get that out, and then I'll be working on the, graph, and I'll be checking my drafting out.
Okay, I guess Sherry, or Deb had to leave. I think the consensus is we have a good plan, just listening, I think, from city staff and from people. Is there a motion on the floor to submit this plan as our recommendations to city council?
Make the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on it?
If you don't vote yes, I'm gonna beat you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. I don't vote. Okay, and I think for the council agenda, in lieu of a just a recommendation, in lieu of an audit committee report, that we move the audit committee report and consideration and action for council to a single item. I think we can combine those two in the meeting if that's possible. And then I think as we present this plan, I think we should be able to have copies for citizens that want to see it. It'll be short enough, or at least to be able to PowerPoint it at the meeting would be a good idea. I would also look to a nice statement from the city manager is to say, hey, we agree with this plan, and these are the steps we're going to take, and, you know, begin the implementation, i.e., we don't need to go into detail about not filling positions. That'd be something that you would report to council later, and I think that should be probably a monthly reporting by the city staff to the council as to how they're dealing with this insolvency plan, so that we're not surprised on that. I don't think we need to do that, but in this format, but I think that would be something that the city manager could certainly say is, you know, that it is his intention to give a monthly update on the actions that he's taking to accomplish these goals. Okay, if there's no other business, it's 9:32. I'll call this meeting adjourned.